Hello, I'm Esther Gido-Yort. It's Tuesday, November 30th. This is Africa 54.
The head of the World Health Organization sounds the alarm on COVID vaccine inequality as the Omicron variant makes its way around the globe. Angry over insecurity, Burkina Faso protesters call for the president to step down. And a Malawi policeman uses sports to change lives.
World Health Organization Chief Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus said the emergence of the highly mutated Omicron variant is a reminder that uneven vaccine distribution will lead to more coronavirus variants. The WHO Director General sounded the alarm at the start of an assembly of health ministers that is expected to launch negotiations on an international agreement on preventing future pandemics. The WHO said in a technical paper issued to member states on Monday that the global risk of the new Omicron variant is very high. There could be future surges of COVID-19, which could have severe consequences depending on a number of factors, including where surges may take place. The organization said that no deaths linked to the Omicron have been reported so far, and it is likely that vaccines would still prevent severe cases and deaths from the variant.
More than 80% of the world's vaccines have gone to G20 countries. Low-income countries, most of them in Africa, have received just 0.6% of all vaccines. We understand and support every government's responsibility to protect its own people. It's natural. But vaccine equity is not charity. It's in every country's best interests. No country can vaccinate its way out of the pandemic alone. The longer vaccine inequity persists, the more opportunity this virus has to spread and evolve in ways we cannot predict nor prevent.
Also speaking at the World Health Assembly was German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who said WHO required reliable financing with higher donations from member states. She also supported WHO's launching negotiations for a binding international accord on preventing pandemics. South Africa's Aspen Pharmacare on Tuesday signed a non-binding deal paving way for J&J COVID vaccine license, according to a statement. The agreement would make Aspen the first African company to have a right over the distribution, pricing and branding of the vaccine. Africa is the least vaccinated part of the world, and many of its leaders have called for vaccine equity. U.S. President Joe Biden says the highly transmissible COVID-19 variant dubbed Omicron is a cause for concern, not panic, and defended his much criticized decision to restrict travel from the southern African region where it was first reported. VOA's Anita Powell reports from the White House.
The enemy has a new name, and it is Omicron. The highly transmissible new coronavirus variant was first identified by South African scientists and named for the 15th letter of the Greek alphabet. President Joe Biden.
This variant is a cause for concern, not a cause for panic. We have the best vaccine in the world, the best medicines, the best scientists, and we're learning more every single day. And we'll fight this variant with scientific and knowledgeable actions and speed, not chaos and confusion.
Shortly after the new variant was announced, Biden imposed travel restrictions on several southern African nations. That drew the immediate ire of South African President Cyril Ramaphosa.
These restrictions are completely unjustified and unfairly discriminate against our country and our southern African sister countries. The prohibition of travel is not informed by science, nor will it be effective in preventing the spread of this variant.
But Biden argues that he's using the restrictions to buy time for more Americans to get vaccinated and take other preventive measures.
The very day the World Health Organization identified the new variant, I took immediate steps to restrict travel from countries in southern Africa. But while we have that travel restrictions can slow the speed of Omicron, it cannot prevent it. But here's what it does. It gives us time. It gives us time to take more actions.
Dr. Tyson Bell, an assistant professor of medicine at the University of Virginia, said there's a lot that scientists don't know about this new variant. For one, whether it's more dangerous. Without knowing that, he said, it's hard to know what the best course of action is.
Both sides of this argument have good points. I think that if you look at where the virus has been isolated now, the Omicron variant, it's in many more countries now, several countries in Europe, and that includes people who do not have direct ties to Southern Africa or South Africa. And so I think the point that this seems discriminatory, it does. The countries that are on the restricted list do not overlap with all the countries that now have isolated cases. And so on the other end, I think that the Biden administration, Dr. Fauci and others, they're trying to contain the spread and buy more time.
President Biden urged unvaccinated Americans to get vaccinated and for the vaccinated to get booster shots if eligible. That's sound scientific advice, Dr. Bell said, and not just for Americans.
This really should be a wake-up call that we need to do as much as we can to get the global population vaccinated, because ultimately, if more variants are able to thrive because virus is circulating at high levels, we have to fix that through effective vaccination and getting it out.
As variants continue to pop up, doctors keep coming back to the same messages for everyone, old, young, American, and otherwise. Mask, distance, and vaccinate. Anita Powell, VOA News, the White House.
At least 5 million people have had their lives cut short by COVID-19. The best defense against this virus is a vaccine. VOA's Carol Pearson explains some of the different approaches to making effective vaccines.
Some people think if you get sick after being vaccinated, the vaccine has failed, but that's not true.
The goal of vaccination is to reduce the severity of disease in almost all vaccines in use and not to prevent infection entirely.
Several studies show the chances of being hospitalized or dying from COVID-19 are severely reduced for people who are vaccinated. The oldest vaccine-making methods use either a live virus or a dead one to spark an immune response. Different polio vaccines have used both. 3 COVID-19 vaccines use weakened adenoviruses, which are viruses that cause colds. The Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine uses a chimpanzee adenovirus that has been weakened so it can't make people sick. Sputnik V and the Johnson & Johnson vaccine use weakened human adenoviruses that can cause colds. The American Society for Gene and Cell Therapy explains how scientists make these vaccines. Scientists removed the gene from the coronavirus's spike protein and put it into the adenoviruses. They also removed the gene in the adenovirus that can cause illness. Think of the adenovirus as an envelope with a message inside. The message tells the cells to make the spike protein. The body makes antibodies to defend itself. If it sees the spike protein again, the body is prepared to attack.
You don't just mount an immune response to the adenovirus, but you also mount the immune response to the protein that it encodes, that spike protein that is part of the virus causing COVID.
Both Johnson & Johnson and Sputnik V's first doses are made with a rare human adenovirus, AD25. Johnson & Johnson used to be considered a one-dose vaccine, but in October, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration's advisory board recommended that a booster be used to increase its effectiveness. The second dose of Sputnik V contains AD5, an adenovirus people are frequently exposed to. Scientists are concerned that Sputnik V doesn't offer enough protection against COVID-19. There are other ways to make vaccines that do not use viruses or bacteria, what scientists call pathogens, that could cause disease. The latest method involves messenger RNA vaccines, or mRNA vaccines, which are produced by Moderna and Pfizer-BioNTech.
They use techniques to trick the immune system into thinking it's seeing a pathogen without actually providing most of or all of the pathogen.
The side effects can include mild soreness, muscle pain, and fatigue.
There are some reports of things like a fever, some nausea, but all of these things can be supported at home.
Rest, fluids, and non-prescription pain relievers should help. Cox says it's not surprising that researchers could develop mRNA vaccines against COVID-19 so quickly. COVID-19 isn't the first attempt at using this technology.
These vaccines could be developed very rapidly because they had been testing vaccines using this strategy against other pathogens.
Just drop your shoulder for me, relax. Yeah.
There's an advantage of having so many vaccines against COVID-19.
Sorry.
The whole world needs to be vaccinated. Hondurans are even willing to cross a river to get the vaccine in neighboring Nicaragua. Another advantage is that scientists might be able to figure out which vaccines work best for different people. Carol Pearson, VOA News.
Turning to West Africa now, security is worsening in Burkina Faso with the deadliest attacks by Islamist militants in years on civilians and security forces. People are protesting the failure of Burkinabe and international forces to stop the violence. Henry Wilkins reports from Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso.
Downtown Ouagadougou, early Saturday. Police fired tear gas into crowds of protesters calling for the resignation of Burkina Faso's president, Roch Kabore.
So as you can see behind me, the military police have just started firing tear gas into the crowd. There were around 400 to 500 people here before. The crowd is now starting to disperse, but there's an eerie silence that's fallen over the scenes here.
Journalists were hit with tear gas too, even after identifying themselves as press. One local radio journalist was injured after being hit in the face with a tear gas canister. In recent days, protests have spread across several cities in Burkina Faso. Demonstrators angry at what they say is the government's inability to counter terrorism after an Al-Qaeda-linked terror group attacked a military outpost in the north of the country, killing at least 50 military police. One protest leader told reporters,
"We want the departure of Roch by noon. We want the resignation of Roch, his government, and the MPP regime."
By early Saturday, the police had blocked entrances to the square where protesters were due to meet. Some protesters began shouting at military police. Others approached them with their hands up to show their support for the security forces. Not all demonstrators were peaceful, however. Some attacked a pickup truck carrying members of a local militia known as the Cogluiego. Others set fire to tyres and threw rocks at security forces, as well as journalists. Mamam Flora Pascalina is a Burkinabe blogger and activist who goes by the nickname Flo Flo. She says she supports the FDS, the Burkinabe security forces, and therefore Saturday's protest against the government.
My heart aches for my people who are dying before my eyes, and I can't stand it. I've thrown myself into this, and I fight night and day for the Burkinabe people, for the FDS.
Protests against French military intervention in Burkina Faso have also taken place in the last 10 days. Demonstrators blocked a French convoy travelling through the country, claiming the soldiers were aiding terrorists. Many Burkinabes, including Flo Flo, believe in conspiracy theories like this, spread over social media. Starting Saturday, November 20th, the government shut down mobile internet for 8 days, in part to stop the spread of misinformation, but also to suppress protests. The government came under pressure from lawmakers about its handling of security and the internet shutdown at a special session of the National Assembly last Friday. The Defence Minister voiced support for the shutdown.
Regretfully, some users of social networks compromise national security and contribute to the weakening of our country to the point of making it vulnerable.
Analysts say the protests may force the government to make concessions.
Some sense politically that there was a need to concede something to some of these demands.
More demonstrations are scheduled for the 10th and 11th of December. Henry Wilkins for VOA News, Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso.
The United States and a number of European countries early November asked their non-emergency citizens to leave Ethiopia because of an armed conflict and civil unrest. On Monday, some French nationals arrived in Paris. Clara Frank has more.
French families landed in Paris on Monday after France decided to repatriate some of its nationals from the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa. A foreign ministry source said Sunday that it had chartered special flights to bring them back to the French capital city. France last week urged all its nationals to leave Ethiopia without delay as the conflict there escalates. Ethiopia's army has retaken the town of Chifra in the Afar region, the state-run broadcaster said on Sunday. It is the first major seizure from rebellious Tigrayan forces since Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed appeared on the front lines 2 days ago. Many who arrived at Charles de Gaulle described Addis Ababa to be generally calm when they left. Mimi Haley is one of them. We were told to leave and that we didn't have a choice. It was the last flight, and if not, we had to put on paper that the French state could not be held responsible for us. We left everything behind. Our house. We have a life there. We have jobs there. And we get here, but we don't know where to stay. I'm paid in Ethiopian currency. I don't know what to give the children. But in Addis Ababa, everything is going fine, honestly. It's all fine. I don't understand. Francois Morande is a French teacher at a school in the Ethiopian capital. He said a large proportion of French nationals living there have decided to leave for France. There's lots of uncertainty. We're not too sure what's going on. 5 to 6 days ago, the rebels seemed very close to Addis Ababa, but we've had little information in the past few days. And the French embassy asked us to go home as fast as possible, so we followed their instruction. Some of my colleagues have decided to stay, but it's a small minority. The great majority of my colleagues have come back to France. The Ethiopian government did not immediately respond to a Reuters request for comment. Clara Frank, Washington.
The United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA, is mobilizing traditional leaders in Niger as agents of change. This includes the fight against child marriage and the promotion of girls' education. UNFPA and Niger's government are relying on the influence of traditional and religious leaders to help improve gender equality in the country. For more insight, Africa 54 correspondent Lino Mudu spoke with Diane Keita, Deputy Executive Director for Program of the United Nations Population Fund.
We are the United Nations Population Fund, so we take care of population, and one of our big aim is to make sure that country get what we call the demographic dividend. In order to get the demographic dividend, we need a demographic transition. We need to make sure that population, first, we can prevent every preventable maternal death. We make sure that there is no gender-based violence and every demands in family planning are met. And then the country will make a shift to the right number of babies and make sure that we get into the right space where the country can take care of its own inclusive growth, where every girl can go to school as every boy. And now we need the community leader, the traditional chief and the religious leader to help us to really advocate for girls staying in school. I'm very proud to be here now because the president of Niger had them make a big commitment to help him, to help all of us, make sure that no girl is married before 18-year-old, and to make sure in their own villages, own community and family to really apply that. They agreed to it, but yet we have to make after this the right laws in favor of that.
When we look at gender-based violence and inequality, then you have traditional leaders that are committing to participate in solution-driven approach. Whose responsibility is it to make the change? What has been the experience with UNFPA when we talk about gender-based violence that are embedded in culture and tradition?
Responsibility is from the whole society. Traditional leaders have a role to play as much as the family themselves. When we give more chance and more opportunities for education, you have vulnerable women, young pregnancies, etc. Whether it's formal education or informal education, we provide safe space for girls. It's everybody's responsibility. But more than ever, we need the political will. Building education for girls will really provide a great wall against every sort of insecurity.
The issue of gender-based violence and education for girls has been on the agenda for a long time for the UN and other organizations. Today, in 2021, what hasn't been done and why are we still where we are?
So for Niger, I think it's a major step where indicators were so low and so bad to see that we want to prioritize girls' education. We want to create a boarding school and give them the safe space they need to thrive, and that is important.
What would you say are some lessons that can be learned from Niger's experience?
The major lesson that we can take out of this is the political will first. After the political will, we need the donor partner, all of us, strong development coordination to make sure that we are complementary to each other. And this is happening here in Niger. And then you try really to make private sector, public sector partnership to ensure that there is an inclusive growth, that is resilience creation for women, for young girls, and for young boys.
The UNFPA's mission is to ensure that every pregnancy is wanted, every childbirth is safe, and every young person's potential is fulfilled. Coming back to the role of traditional leaders, what concrete steps can they take in their communities?
First, a community leader that speaks to the high community or the wise men and wise women of this community, telling for us to move forward, we need to stop giving away our girls in wedding before the age of 18. When they say that and explain, thanks to the teaching they got from us, community listen immediately. We have here at least 10 of the traditional leaders who have changed their communities, those informal law at their level. Another one was the chief of Tessawa, just built 1,000 school classrooms equipment to put at the disposal. Why did they do that? They link school to what they produce in agriculture to make sure that for every production there is an incentive taken out in favor of school and in favor of children. And that's very important. It has to be practical because traditional people, rural people, they understand exactly what you're asking, the practical result and outcome. Otherwise, they cannot, relate to it.
The 16 days of activism against gender-based violence is from November 25th to December 10th. What is your message this year?
Let's stop violence. You may have heard what happened to that Guinean girl, Masila. This is 25-year-old, raped in a medical environment, and she just passed away. That's shocking. This is exactly the kind of thing that should not happen anywhere. Please, everyone, during those 16 days of activism, in your own community, try to contribute your little part in this. Because gender-based violence, it has everyone's door. Look out for your neighbor. Look out for what's happening in your own house.
Diene Keita, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm so grateful.
That was Africa 54 correspondent Lino Mudu speaking with Diene Keita, Deputy Executive Director for Program of the United Nations Population Fund. Malawian policeman Kandua Sande won an Innovation Award for Sports in 2017 for cleaning up a rundown public football pitch. Now Sande is building a public sports complex aimed at keeping youth healthy and helping reduce crime. Lamek Masina reports from Machinga district in Malawi.
One could mistaken Kandua Sande for a contractor hired to clean up the once dilapidated public football pitch in Machinga. But Sande is a police officer at the Machinga police station, one who has a passion for sports. The 42-year-old sub-inspector, also athletics coach, has volunteered to turn a once-forsaken pitch into a sports complex with facilities like a track, netball court, and climbing walls for children. He says the aim is to develop sports and reduce crime such as rape and sexual assault, now rampant in his community.
As one of our responsibilities as police officers is to also reduce the crime, to prevent people from doing crime. So when one is idle, surely that person will indulge him or herself in other bad behaviors, like committing crimes.
Kandua has been doing voluntary work since 2011, using savings from his monthly salary and working during his free time.
I don't spend my lunch hour, 1 hour, 30 minutes, eating only, no. So I also work at least maybe 50 minutes every day of my lunch hour is sacrificed for voluntary work.
But over the years, Sunday ignored insults from people who don't understand the motive of his work, some calling him a mad person. He asked his wife to also ignore them.
Because I knew people would say so many things to my wife. Are you allowing this one to do this job? Are you married to this person, this mad person? So I said, don't tell me anything you hear from other people. That will derail me from doing this.
In 2017, his dedication to volunteer work earned him an Innovation Award for Sports, which involved a month-long visit to China, where he learned how best to proceed with his initiative. Soon after, he purchased and used machinery to help fast-track his initiative. Government sports officials and community leaders sometimes visit the facility to appreciate the work he is doing.
Ours is just an appeal to other well-wishers to help Sunday in areas he can't do on his own, like constructing a fence around the ground so that all the sporting activities should be done inside the fence.
The Ministry of Sports and the Machinga District Council will run the facility because it remains government property. Sunday says the sports complex is now nearly complete and is expected to officially open to the public at the end of December. Lamek Masina for VOA News, Machinga, Malawi.
Way to go, Officer Kandua Sunday. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thank you for watching.